Well, yeah, but like, cause I mean, come on, back in early Magic, that card, like that art was like so iconic, right? It's like,
Love it.
it's just like cool demon with with a book, and like, yeah, he's gonna teach you the good shit, right?
Welcome to Shattered Signal, a podcast brought to you by the Shattergang. My name is Baz, and today myself and co-host Luke are joined by the wonderful Charlotte Sable. Hello, Charlotte.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yay, happy to be here.
How are you doing today?
I am doing all right.
And Luke, you well, friend?
I am well.
And what about you, Baz?
Me? Oh, I'm good. Right now, I'm on holiday from work, so I'm in like the best mood ever.
Awesome.
So perfect time to record a podcast rather than being grumpy like I was last time.
Mm-hmm.
So for those that don't know, Charlotte is a longtime Magic judge and member of the Commander format panel. She occasionally writes for Commander's Herald and ran the Magic Judge Tumblr account for over a decade, which is no small feat. That is a long period of time to dedicate to any project. So welcome again, Charlotte. It's great to have you here. And as folk might have judged by the title, or if you've been paying attention, our last episode, we talked about the Commander bracket system. We're here to interview Charlotte all about her, obviously, but our participation in the Commander format panel. So thank you again for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here. Always happy to talk to good people.
Oh, well, hopefully that's still the attitude at the end of the interview. But yeah, we're in the midst of triple spoilers, well, quadruple spoiler season. We just got the SpongeBob secret lair dropped with rumors of a new Marvel secret lair about to be revealed as well. How are we feeling about spoiler season right now?
I mean, I'm not a SpongeBob person. I'm a little old for it. Like, it's after my generation, and just never really got into it. I don't hate it or anything, but it's just doesn't appeal, doesn't bother. It's great for people who want it. Some of the card choices are kind of funny, so
yeah, definitely. I'm similar to you. Like,
people who like it, great. For people who don't like it,
yeah. And I think that's the perfect thing about Secret Lair, where it is apart from mechanically unique cards, which is kind of like another category of things to discuss. But yeah, I love it that you can get the art style you like of cards that you love, and similarly, if there's franchises and IP that you adore, like I did for like Transformers, and what was the other Secret Lair I bought recently? Oh, Marvel. Of course, how do you forget about Marvel?
Yeah.
Drop the trauma.
I know, totally. Like, try to forget about it. Too many spoilers. They all kind of start pushing out the other cards from my memory. But yeah, I thought some of the card choices for SpongeBob was interesting. I like how they're selling back memes to us. But yeah, the cards they've included are really, really good. And I'm always a fan of no mechanically unique cards.
Yes.
So yeah, I look forward to seeing that across the battlefield. Particularly the counter spell. That's going to be a brutal one.
It will.
Honestly, surprised that one didn't have flavor text. But
yeah, it was a little bit late, but who knows? Who knows with the art direction? And I know you'll be happy for a Toxrill reprint. Look.
Yeah, I've got a Toxrill. I've not built it because it's a horrible deck, but I actually love Gary as a character. I was also too old for SpongeBob, but my daughter grew up watching it. She kind of hit that 10 and 11 phase where she was watching SpongeBob, so we used to be on a lot, so you just sit and watch it. And it's harmless fun. But the counter spell and Toxrill are probably the best. I don't think much of the choice for Mr. Krabs. I thought maybe having something with treasure would be quite cool because it's thematic to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, as you said, as long as it's not mechanically unique cards behind a paywall, I'm absolutely fine with it.
Yeah. For sure. And who would have guessed you were the closeted SpongeBob, not lover, but wiki. Watch this space for more content on that.
Although now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, I know nothing about the characters, but come on, there's a character named Gary, and you didn't make it Grey Merchant of Asphodel?
For sure. For sure. Legitimizing
Although I guess they wanted them to all be legendary, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Sorry, getting excited at the thought of Grey Merchant being a legendary creature.
Oh god, that would be great.
Awful, but wonderful.
That would actually be horrible, but yeah. Gary, Merchant of Asphodel.
I love it, love it, love it. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, which was only a moment ago, we are here to find out a little bit more about you, Charlotte. So, tell us a little bit about your history with Magic the Gathering, because it seems like you've been in the space for a little while.
Yeah, so I actually started playing Magic in, I can never remember if it was like late 94 or early 95. I think it was 95. I was in like grade 8, grade 9, somewhere in that space. And basically it was just the thing that people were doing in the lunchroom. I started playing basically right before Fallen Empires came out, but when the Dark was already like scarce as all the early expansions were. But yeah, so I started with Revised as my base set, and yeah, back in the day of Swamp, Dark Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre. So
amazing. Yeah, I can't imagine.
And unsleeved rubber banded goblin decks at the lunch table, and you know, I mean, card sleeves just weren't a thing until like end of 95, right? The very first deck protectors, which are just clear. Anyway, but yeah, I started playing then. I played through until Tempest, then like life stuff happened, not necessarily good. You know, don't want to get into all of it, but like family issues. So I stopped playing. I always was interested in the game, but I didn't get back into it until like 2006-ish. Basically, I was just in like a convenience store, and they had like Magic cards. They had it behind like some, you know, plexiglass, and then I saw like Time Spiral, and I like asked if I could look at like a, you know, well, not a starter deck, but like what were they called back then? The tournament packs with like the 75 cards.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and it was like, oh, like nostalgia. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll buy this. Like it seems fun, you know. I mean, it's like if it's a callback thing, and literally, my first 2 of the rares. I think it was actually only 2 rares in those, but anyway, 2 of the rares in that tournament pack were well, one of them was Jaya Ballard, who was like my favorite character from Flavor Text back in the day. And then I don't think I got a Lotus Bloom. I got something else that was like very nostalgic for me, though. Anyway, but yeah, I was basically hooked again. I didn't have anyone to like locally play with, so I just started like buying and collecting, and then got more back into it through Magic Online, like early Magic Online. But anyway, but yeah, but basically after that, I've been playing like steadily since. I became a judge in 2009, just before the M10 came out with the big rules change. I probably would have delayed testing, but I was afraid because I'd studied up on the, you know, on the pre-M10 rules, and was like, okay, no, I don't want to like have to unlearn and relearn things, you know. But yeah, but I've been a judge ever since then. And then basically got into Commander through judging because, you know, it was the judge format back in the day, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, built my first deck in, if it wasn't 2009, then it was like 2010, right? But yeah, like it was, you know, right around there. And yeah, and I mean, I've been playing Commander ever since. So
wow, that is a stretch
I've
of time.
I've waxed and waned with it. Like there'll be times where I haven't played a lot, but I've like never not had a deck since then. So
Who was
That
your
wasn't
first
even
commander?
then. It was my first commander was Earl the Miststalker.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we've had our ass kicked by that commander a few times, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
Might even be getting our
Yeah.
ass kicked this week with it as well.
Yeah. It's a good card. It's a fun card. I mean, it's an interesting commander. I've actually been considering, like, I have it built right now as a pre-DH deck, right? Like nothing from
Nice.
since the actual commander printings, but like just compared to modern design, that the a lot of like the stuff does hold. Can't really play it with anyone unless it's an actual pre-DH pod. And so I'm thinking of like actually just turning it into a proper commander deck again, which would be fun. Right? Probably keep a lot of like my pet cards from back in the day, but like actually like, you know, put in more card draw is the big thing, right? Because unless you draw one of, I think there's only like 3 Enchantress effects in pre-DH for Earl, and it's like, okay, if you don't draw one of those, your card flow isn't there.
You won't have
But anyway,
sickness.
yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
But no, like,
geez.
Yeah, but no, it was like for an Enchantress, Mesa Enchantress's presence, and that's it.
I'm still played in the Enchantress shell to this day.
Oh, sorry, and Argothian Enchantress, my bad. There are
Argothian,
4.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, but yes, that's yeah, that was my first, and it was the one I kept it together for a long time, but then it sort of calcified and it evolved a couple of times, but I was never like quite as happy with it. So eventually it sort of got disassembled, and then I rebuilt it as pre-DH. And I've liked it, but like it's, again, I've never played a proper pre-DH pod with it. So I kind of, you know, if I'm gonna keep it, I'd probably, you know, I'm probably gonna rebuild it as a proper, you know, modern commander deck, not like, you know, super high bracket or anything, but like, you know, probably as a 2, maybe a 3. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, again, with certain things, it's really hard for new cards to break in, right? Like, you know.
Yeah, especially in like established like Voltron. It's like I feel like Earl's like still a quintessential Voltron
Enchantress
commander
stuff. Like, yeah. Although honestly, I feel like if I built it these days, there'd be almost too many Enchantress effects to fit in the deck, right? Like, it's like, because it's just like, you know, they just keep pumping up more and more and more. It's sort of like the same problem that you can have with like a +1/+1 counters deck, because there's so many things that are like, if you would add counters, add an extra counter, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, it's like you have a bunch of those, but like all you're doing is piling counters, and what are you actually doing with the deck other than having a bunch of dice on your cards, right? Like,
yeah, it feels like a lot of decks get a bit homogenous as well, because
yeah, exactly.
Those are like your very popular archetypes. Like you're naturally going to skew to like the most efficient cards that do that. But with it having such a broad pool of cards to pull from, I guess brewers that do try to avoid homogenization have like a couple of more options. So like one of our guests last year, Bobby Christine, she has a rule for brewing where she doesn't have duplicate cards outside of like basic, like certain lands, no duplicate cards in any of her decks. And I thought like that's quite like between curious decks. So, yeah, for sure. And I thought that was quite
unified construction commander.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So that intrigued me a lot as well.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. For some things, I try and do that. Right. It's a lot of times we'll be like, oh, well, I'm already playing this in this deck or that deck, or, you know, I'll allow, you know, a certain card in. I mean, I'm just more of the opinion. I'm not a fan of staples. It's like, you know, it's more like, okay, well, does the deck A really need this, or B, is it very on theme, right? Like for example, like I play Demonic Tutor only in a couple of decks, right? One of which is my Demon Kindred deck. So actually, let me see if I can.
I mean, now you have Demonic Consultation. You don't even need not Demonic Consultation. What am I thinking of?
Demonic Council.
Demonic Council. Thank you so much. So you don't need Demonic Tutor anymore either.
Well, but it's Demonic Tutor.
Yeah, I know. It's
Good that demons are tutoring each other and not trying to exploit, mortals. That's
Yeah. A demonic tutor for the other one, and
it's like you're a bad demon.
I mean,
learn.
I also have a beta demonic tutor, and
Nice.
I'm gonna play it
That's
in
a
my
flex.
demon
Look
deck.
at that.
So I was just gonna mention that artwork because that was like in the height
Oh
of
yeah,
the
I mean,
satanic
again,
panic.
because like, well, yeah, but like, I mean, come on, back in early Magic, that card, like that art was like so iconic, right? It's like,
Love it.
it's just like cool demon with a with a book, and like, yeah, he's gonna teach you the good shit, right?
Yeah, that's the not the beta printing. I think it means is the revised printing. But that's the monitor I have.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, cards are made to be played with, right? Like,
Totally agree.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's why I play with my duels. I play with that. Like, I don't know. I only have, I think, one card that's too expensive that I don't want to play with it, which is a Judge Foil Survival of the Fittest, which is just like
nice.
That's like, what, $1,500 or something stupid. And it's like, I think I'm gonna
as well.
say, oh, it's beautiful. I love it. I have a playmat with the art on it. And it's just,
nice,
gorgeous. It's a shame though, because like the Judge Foil art is so pretty, and you just can't be reprinted again. But anyway, yeah.
I mean, that's the good and bad thing. Like, it's good that it's a special thing. I think, like most people that work on the ground with like tournament organizing and whatnot, it's hard work, and I think that's a really good way of rewarding people for keeping the mechanism of competitive play.
There are no new Judge Foils coming, but hopefully eventually they'll sort that all out, get more flowing. But I mean, the last bunch weren't the greatest anyway. So.
No,
it is what it is. And also, like, I feel like in the era of secret layers and a million special printings, Judge Foils don't mean as much anymore. So
yeah, that's fair.
I do like the Judge Foil food chain. I always thought that was smart.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Because the original food chain is just like a pile of mud with maggots, and then you got this beautiful.
Although I mean, there is something charming about that mud pile, right?
There is.
The fact that it's such an unassuming art. It look, like that mud pile like reminds me of like the art for like Night Soil from like Fallen Empires or whatever, and it's like
Let's see. Anytime I see it, I just think of the scene from Jurassic Park where they drive up next to the Triceratops that's had a gigantic
a big pile of crap. Okay.
Yeah. That's a big pile of shit.
That's a big pile of shit.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that's as I kind of knew, but expected you to have quite a long experience with Magic. That's really cool that it's something you kind of went away from and were able to come back to. It's quite a common story for a lot of people, and I like it because we are newer to Magic. We only started playing. I can't remember how long ago it was now. What, 8 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it was like M19, I think was the
course. Yeah, M19, yeah. So, it's lovely to hear people that have like a certain romanticism to the game, or just they know that it's the best game ever.
Can I add one more thing to my history just because I just remembered it?
Absolutely.
She's going into a safe.
Oh, folks! So if you're listening to the podcast, you're gonna have to come over onto YouTube to see because we're about to be revealed something.
All right, so this is my original Alliances set that I collected and opened at the time, complete with the original Inquest checklist.
That's cool.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And I've also never like gone back and sleeved the cards or reordered them or anything. I will admit I've pulled a couple of things out of this to put in decks, but like for the most part it's intact and it's the original one, and it's like the only cards I have back from my first time. My first stint in Magic.
Very cool.
And it's only because this was like buried in a box in, my mom's closet. But yeah, this means a lot to me. Like, I don't know. I kind of feel bad for collectors today because it's so hard to actually like collect, right? I knew, like, even like back when I was getting into Commander, I knew people who collected Magic as a whole. Like they just wanted one of every card, one of every, they wanted complete sets of anything. Didn't need to be fancy. They just, I want to have the cards. And that's just so impossible these days if you're wanting to get every version or every, But anyway, I mean, yeah. That's my prized relic from early Magic to remind me, yes, I was there. It's even ordered in like not the way we order sets now. Like literally, I believe like what do we have here? We have, I think it's literally you take like the heading and you alphabetize that list. So I have artifacts, then black, then blue, then gold, then green, then red, then white. Okay, lands are still at the back, but it's like,
which is ironic because they're usually played up front back in the day.
Well, yeah, but there wasn't the like standardized, like, sets weren't numbered back then, right? Like there's no
true
standardized way to arrange things, Anyway, but yeah. It's just funny, like the little idiosyncrasies of like the early stuff, right?
Yeah, but that's I guess, what is it? Not the hipster thing, but it's like it's the things you enjoy because you were there at the time enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotta be honest.
Alliances is also a cool set to have a full version of because it did have the multiple arts for stuff, and
I think the first card.
It's also like a relatively small set, so
was like Pokemon, and my cards certainly aren't sleeved. They're sitting in the loft somewhere with a rubber band around them, just rotting away at my mum's. So it's nice that you have that little bit of history from when you first got into it. It's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really special.
Yeah, no problem.
Amazing. So that is the game. So what about the format panel itself? Like how did that come around? Because I believe you were part of the advisory group beforehand.
Yes, I was on the Commander advisory group from its inception as well in 2019. I was one of the original 6 people invited by Sheldon and the rest of the RC at that time. And then I toughed it out through the ups and downs of those 5 years. And then basically when all of the bad stuff happened last year that led to the handover to Wizards, when the Commander format panel was created, basically everyone who had been on the RC or CAG was invited to join the format panel. And I think all but like 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know, all but a small handful of people basically decided to join, and then they also added some new people. So I've joined through that means, though. Yeah, I feel like I hopefully would have gotten an invitation anyway, but yeah, so there was no like interview because I was basically grandfathered in, right? But like, yeah. But no, I mean, it's good. It's basically, philosophically, at least a continuation, except that we're kind of both RC and CAG together now, except the ultimate decision is with Wizards and not with us, right? For
sure.
Although Wizards is like 99% of the time going to do what we say to do, so.
That's good. It seems like
or in another way, it's like
Gavin
is the RC, and yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, we get paid now, which is nice. So.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. That's
I didn't know that. That's
fantastic
cool.
news.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a decent amount of money. It's not like a salary, but it's, it's enough money to have some fun with. So.
Cool.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Buy some of those shiny secret layers that we all covet.
Or, a new computer or whatever, actual things,
Yes.
Yeah, those things are important too, I suppose, if we must.
If we must, yes. Sadly, we cannot spend all our money on the pretty cardboard.
No, God. Moving quickly on. So what would you say, what's like a typical month on the advisory panel?
Okay,
like,
so basically
what do you
we communicate.
Get up to?
So we communicate through a Discord server. And basically it's sort of rolling, ongoing conversations. thus far, since we're still in sort of the initial phase, it's very much Gavin brings us like ideas to discuss, or projects or whatever, right? And then we sort of work on and iterate them and spin off ideas and bounce things back and forth and what have you. Again, things have been, the first little bit was the first like little bit right after the announcement was basically just sort of feeling out each other, getting to know each other. A lot of us knew each other from the RC and CAG, but then there's the new people, and we don't want them to A, feel excluded, or B, feel like they're lesser, or, basically we want to set up systems that make sure that everyone is, like this is a new thing. So it's setting up a new sort of paradigm for everything.
100%.
But for the most part, it's basically just a bunch of people in a room talking, sharing their experiences, commenting on other people's stuff, and in general doing it in a productive adult way where we can criticize each other without people getting defensive or what have you. So
That's good.
Very
That seems
much
healthy.
An
Yeah.
open forum, just free fire
Yeah.
space where you can just all express yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, again, so far, basically, we have mostly been working on what became the commander brackets, and a couple tangentially related ideas that didn't end up getting worked into that system. And then and then there was like, we got to give feedback on like the well, obviously the panel was formed before an announcement was made about it, and so we got to give feedback on what the announcement would look like and that sort of thing, just so that basically everyone was comfortable with it and what have you. But yeah, I mean, so far it's basically just been that. We're still mostly focused on the commander brackets and the things that are rolling out of that, but we've also started to get hints of, and started to give comments on like some future stuff that I cannot discuss beyond saying that there is future stuff that we have discussed that is not related to brackets or ban list or whatever. Yeah, but yeah, basically every topic has its own channel, and we also have like just fun discussion channels where we share like pictures and deck lists and just cool stuff in our lives, and it's people who work together, so we have social outlets as well. And
that's good. I think that's really important, especially when you're talking about bringing in new people to an established group as well. Like that is spending time in digitally and in person is like the best way to actually build up that trust and that all those good things that we need to do as humans to work effectively together.
This is really interesting to me, actually, hearing how it's all developed. It fills me with a lot of joy. Do you look at new pre-constructed decks that are coming out, and do you sit down and review them, or do you have a look?
We haven't
Is that something you're directly involved in?
We haven't been consulted on that sort of thing yet. I will say, like, one of the future things is commenting on a new, not like specific cards, but like, this is a thing we would like to do. How do you all feel about it? Cool. That sort of thing. Yeah. Or like, we need like, or like X change is going to happen. A, how do you feel about it? B, here's Y and Z things that we could also roll out with it because they're related. But do you think that's a good idea? Yes, no, et cetera, right? More big picture consultation than like, please look at this commander deck. Please look at these legendary creatures, right? It's more, it's less, again, it's more, we're seeing the forest and not the trees, right? Like, yeah. I'm sure we will start to, again, once the big stuff's out of the way, I'm sure we will start to get brought in more on that sort of thing. And once the panel is more of a thing, and again, they work so far out that a lot of stuff is already like developed at this point, right? So like
Absolutely.
I'm sure we wouldn't have had an opportunity to comment on like the Final Fantasy decks or the, Tarkir decks or whatever else, right? Probably nothing for this year. But again, I don't know.
That makes sense. It's still it's a
Yeah.
as much as it's in some folk are established in the group already. It's still a new thing, and the formalization with Wizards is a new thing as well. So there's not so much building up the trust, but just building up that sort of workflow, which just will take time.
Isn't it great that they're taking this group of experienced people that have a love of the game and understand how it works fundamentally, and actually, asking for their opinion rather than we're just going to do this. And then you've got to decide. Because previously you had to decide, well, that card's problematic or this is problematic. It's now more that they're having a discussion with you for various changes they're looking to implement. No, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's also nice. It feels nice to be like, while I do, mourn the loss of the rules committee and Commander as an independent format. I feel it was going to be inevitable just because the format was getting so big and something was going to happen. But like, it still sucks the way it did happen. I would have preferred maybe a more gradual handover or whatever, right? Like, or even just a non like emergency handover. But
yeah, go out on a high rather than how it did happen.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, this is serving as sort of a reset, a re-examination, and that's actually letting. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but like for a long time on the keg, I had problems with a lot of structural stuff in the format, a lot of ways Wizard worked, but like, I could say to people I knew at Wizards, including several people in the RC, hey, I don't like this, yada, yada, yada. But I'm just one voice, whereas now we're on a panel that's working directly with and for Wizards. And so hopefully our voices mean a little more in that respect. And we have an opportunity to sort of reshape, the space of Commander for the moment, right?
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. That's certainly our hope. As soon as I heard, huge responsibility. I feel as soon as I heard that the original team were coming on board for the most part, I instantly had a lot more faith in the change. So fingers crossed it continues to be big positives.
Yeah, indeed.
So speaking of big positives, or certainly it's our opinion so far, if you've listened to the dear listeners, if you've listened to the previous podcast, the bracket system. So that's obviously one of the, and you mentioned just a moment ago, one of the big rollouts from the new panel. Can you tell us a little bit about what the initial spark behind the bracket system was? Is it something that was of the previous rules committee, or like did this come from Wizards? We'd be really curious just to know like the beginnings of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't speak to the like specifics from before the handover. I know some of what. So basically, when the handover happened, Wizards also published like a very initial, early sort of pre-alpha snapshot of brackets, right? Like just as here's the sort of thing we're going to do with the format, right?
For sure.
As far as I know, that had been from preliminary talks between Wizards and the RC, but that had not yet come down to the CAG level. Commander Advisor Group, CAG. I'm just used to calling it the CAG. For,
I suspect if people are listening to this, they're likely enfranchised. You're right to.
I try to not use jargon when I can help it, but yes. Anyway, but yeah, so it hadn't come down to that. But basically, so that was released. Not that we hadn't been discussing. I mean, obviously, fixing or improving untrusted play, non playgroup play, basically, was, a big thing that we were always sort of discussing and trying to figure out. But, it's one of the intractable problems of a social format, right? Like, how do you get people to sit down that want to play the same game? But yeah, so it wasn't like, so what did pass down to Wizards came through the RC, not through the CAG. Then that snapshot was published, and then there was what, like a month and a half, whatever, before people got invited to the Commander format panel, and yeah, and then basically once that was in place, it was like, okay, so this brackets thing we talked about, we've been iterating on it internally, but we obviously want you all to work on it with us. And basically, as soon as the Commander format panel was formed, we basically took the reins on the bracket system. And then basically what we made was shared with people at Wizards for feedback, but it was primarily on us to be the driving force on it from that point.
Okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
that's reassuring to see, and I think that translates in how it's ended up in its current iteration. I know it's specifically brackets beta.
Yeah, absolutely. This is beta. Rolling out 1.0 hopefully by the end of April, but no, not necessarily. I mean, I'm sure it's Wizards, so they'll probably do something, but I'm sure there'll be an update if not. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to work through still. We're still waiting on like the actual concrete feedback from the test at Chicago and all of that. So, but yeah, but hopefully end of April should be good. But again, that just because it's becomes a 1.0 release, it's because it's actually rolled out doesn't mean it's not going to change more. But right now, the beta is, an initial. This is the shape of it that we like. Some of the specifics are probably going to change. But once it's like rolled out more in April, then it's more going to be iterating rather than, more wholesale changes, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like my background's in software, so it's like, nothing is ever final.
Yeah,
it's just it's forever changing, and that's important as well, because the game that we love is always changing too. Like not significantly, but every new set or every new meta that's established, like the dial changes. So yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a healthy way to approach it as well, where taking time to hear the feedback, actually understand it, and contemplate like, well, what could we do to improve it? Or
instead of rushing, building up a comprehensive data set and then obviously reviewing it.
Also, Gavin's taking a much deserved vacation right now.
Nice.
So we're in a bit of a lull. So
good.
Although if you're watching his social media, he isn't really. He's still posting content.
Well, yes,
but it's lovely seeing him on a cruise.
Yeah,
for sure. No, it's a lot.
He might be back by now, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
But that is the strength of
working.
Yeah, no, 100%. I imagine he's not replying to emails, but I think that's the benefit of broadening out the kind of inner circle of the what is now the Commander format panel, where it's a lot of big things to decide for a small group, and even then it's not like the Commander format panel's huge, so it's still a lot to process and delegate and collaborate on. So we'll see how it goes.
What, like 19 of us? I think I might be wrong on that, but
that's good. 19 would be good, because that means you've always got a vote, like a vote breaker. What? Oh God, what's the word?
I know it's high. It's in the high teens right now, plus Gavin. So yeah, but it's a lot of people and a lot of voices. But that also means that it doesn't feel like we have to wait for everyone's feedback on everything, because there's enough people talking that basically the the larger opinions are going to be shared.
Yeah, for sure. And it means that perhaps not everyone feels like they need to be involved in absolutely every discussion as well, if there's enough of a healthy discussion happening already.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess we could, if you don't mind, we maybe go into a little bit of specifics around the bracket. So I am curious, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I feel like I'm plugging this so hard, but I'm like, please listen to more of our content, dear viewers.
Although if someone's listening to this, I hope they've listened to the other stuff. But maybe it's just because you have someone from the CFP. So
absolutely no, we did
CFP
feel it was,
does not roll off the tongue like CAG does.
really doesn't. Sounds like something from pharmaceuticals. But
or like a also, file format.
Yeah, exactly. Something.
So I've attached the CFP, and I'm gonna need the SVG back as soon as you can. And
oh no, I'm not on work just now. I'm off. God, but yeah, no, we felt it was important to kind of get our opinions and thoughts and reactions on the record before interviewing anyone about it, because I feel like that's important to have our stance out there rather than just kind of like cherry picking from other people.
Shaped and exactly.
And also it gives you a chance to go, actually, you guys are crazy, but I don't want to do this interview anymore. So in the oh god, you're so right. In the previous one, I mentioned that I really liked that it was 5 brackets, and moved away from the 1 to 10 that we kind of just were fumbling around with. What was I'm just curious to understand what was the decision around that, and like where did particularly, sorry, I'm just like waffling, but very curious about like exhibition and CDH, because they do feel like they feel like they're like the catch-all of either side of the scale. So
they're the long tails, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, I mean, when we started, well, first of all, brackets weren't the only system we were thinking of. We were considering like a more psychographic based system as well.
Okay.
But that didn't really come together the same way brackets did. Also, I'll put it on the record here. I don't like the name brackets for it, because brackets in my brain feels very like competitive, league, sports league, tiered sort of thing, right? I wish there was a better name, but unfortunately, even the 20-ish of us together haven't come up with anything better, so it's brackets for now, but fingers crossed maybe someone comes up with a brainstorm of something better. I just, I personally, it feels too, not jargony, but it feels very, it feels a bit too sharp in a way, right, for what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think,
and it feels too much like power level, right? Like, but again, hopefully the communication is getting out there. But yes, so as for settling on 5, so in the initial sort of snapshot that Wizards posted with the format handover, there were, I believe, 4, but that was weird system where every card was assigned to a bracket, or a lot of cards were. And so it was like whatever your highest card is your bracket. And like there's elements of that in the current system, but it's also not that. And like we very much immediately, like everyone hated that, right? Wizards themselves was already like off of that. Sorry, give me 1 second. My headphones are telling me battery is low, so I need to plug them in, but I don't have to like take them off. Right. So basically, so we had started with the 4 from the snapshot, and then we had started to like, basically we hated that. We hated the like every card gets assigned a number sort of thing, and because then you're looking at like a point system, or you're looking at like something that people aren't going to be able to do without the help of like a deck builder site or whatever, right? Like, I know that there's people out there that wish it was that wish it was like a system that you put your deck on Moxfield or Architect or whatever, and it spits out, your deck. It has a power rating of 2,428, right? Like,
Insert Vegeta meme.
So yeah.
yeah. But like, you know, or whatever, right? Or like, your deck is 206, right? Like, whatever. But we wanted it. The thing is, the system needs to live or die on like accessibility. There has to be, it has to be like, again, that pregame conversation still has to be like, a 2-minute talk. It also needs to be something that someone who maybe hasn't heard of the system can assess their deck on relatively easily in a pregame sort of time frame, right? Like, like maybe you don't know, like, like that's why you want a small game changer list. You want, relatively simple deck construction rules or limits or whatever. And so we wanted a small number of brackets. We started with the four. We liked four. One of the initial things I'd said in the snapshot is we don't want it to be an odd number because we don't want people to be defaulting to the middle, right? Because if there's a system with an odd number of things, people like the middle, right? So if you have a survey, it's maybe better to put 4 or 6 options on, agree to disagree, so that people have to take a side, right? But just the way things shook out and sort of the rough sort of like categories that we were thinking of, it ended up basically there being like, low, medium, high sort of power, and then CEDH. And we decided early on, mostly thanks to the CEDH people on the format panel, people like Deco and Lua and Rebel, basically they very much wanted CEDH to be called out as its own thing, because it is very much its own thing, right? It's not quite a format variant, but it's the form. It's like the high end of the format distilled in a way, right?
For sure.
It's its own thing, but it's also still Commander, right? Like, but we basically decided that like, we want, CEDH has to be acknowledged as part of the format. And, we'd also decided very early on, we'll just call it CEDH. We're not going to give it an alternate name. It's just like, no, it's CEDH. It's an established enough brand sort of thing, right? And then for a while, we were playing with 4 with CEDH at the top and precons at the bottom. But me and some other people, I think I was one of the first voices, but like there were other people that joined me thereafter. I was like, look, there needs to be a spot for weird decks, for decks that are just weaker than a precon, either by, this is my haunt deck, or this is my, a deck playing into a weak mechanic, a deck built with a weird restriction, a deck, everything has 4 mana value. Everything has, like, for example, I mean, I have an exhibition deck. My exhibition deck is my, in quotes, goblin deck, right? I call it what it says on the tin. Basically, the construction rule of it is, other than basic mountain, every card in that deck has to have the word goblin in its name.
Love it.
Or a like planar equivalent, right? So I can run cards with Mog or Aki or, Chiron or whatever, right? Like, but I can't, for example, I can't run Conspicuous Snoop. I can't run, some powerful goblin cards, right? Can't run Warren Instigator, that doesn't say goblin. But at the same time, I can run stuff like Mog Catcher, which isn't a goblin, but, and then and like, I build that deck to be the best it can be, but it is very not good, right? It cannot win a normal game of Commander, but I'm still going to try, right?
Yeah.
I'm still going to have fun while doing it, right? So to me, it's not that I specifically wanted a home for that deck, but like, I know those decks exist. I know other people have
definitely,
weird like 5-drop decks or whatever, right? Ladies Looking Left is like the classic one that you hear about, or the chair deck or whatever, right?
The chair deck,
yeah. But like, again, exhibition is for more than that. Exhibition is sometimes for just, look, I really like these characters and this mechanic, but like, the deck doesn't really do much with it because there's just not a lot, right? And like it's important to have a home for people because like exhibition, again, like in reality, there's basically 3 brackets and then there's 2 specialized brackets on either end, right? You're not going to build an exhibition deck or a CEDH deck without intentionally doing so, right?
For sure.
Like, but there still needs to be the home for those decks because the whole breadth of the format is important and we want people to, I mean, also part of the reason that I pushed for exhibition is like I want there to be space for people to actually make these kinds of decks. Maybe you've never considered it because you've never seen the ability to play it somewhere, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or even the language to know that that's kind of like how you would brew something like that.
Exactly. And I mean, and again, like I know when the brackets were first announced, a lot of people like looked at, the infographics and were like, well, what's the difference between 1 and 2 and 4 and 5? And if you have to ask that, then your deck is a 2 or a 4. It's not the other one.
100%.
Right? But yeah, like so basically that's how we settled on the number of 5. As to what they were called, we decided basically early on that we wanted them to have names and the names needed to be resonant and distinguishable, and that like ideally if it were up to me I never would have assigned numbers to anything because numbers imply power scale, imply whatever. But that, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, so you can't but so the numbers are out there. But I mean, maybe we'll not have them on like the final 1.0 list and there'll be a colloquial thing, which would be nice. And then, later people maybe don't use the numbers or like whatever. But yeah, so that's how we settled on the 5 brackets that we have. The names sort of came about organically. Exhibition is one. I think I'm the first one that suggested it, but I like in that it's like both it has multiple meanings in that it can be like I'm showing off something, but also it's like not a serious game, right? Right. It's like an exhibition match, preseason or whatever, but it's also this is my exhibition of cards with goblin in the name, or of cards with chairs, or every card in this deck has 2 people in the art or whatever, right? Like, I mean, I like that double meaning. I'm very proud of that one. The other names came about just sort of organically as we were throwing stuff around. There was quite a discussion back and forth on, like, we loved exhibition. We knew CADH was in. As soon as someone suggested core, it was like, yeah, that's the right name for that. But then the names for like the 3rd and 4th brackets were sort of bounced around a bit because it's like, okay, well, we need it to sort of be obvious, which is a higher power, or which is a more fast sort of deck. And so like we were throwing around like tuned as an option, but then it's like, well, is tuned better than upgraded, or is upgraded better than tuned? Is optimized better than tuned? Is tuned better than optimized?
For sure.
But yes, but I feel like exhibition core, upgraded, optimized CEDH is reasonable. I still feel like upgraded gets misinterpreted in a lot of ways, in that I've seen people think that as soon as you change one card in a precon, it's bracket 3, and it's not. I've also seen a lot of people like clench on to the precon part of the definition of core and think that it's only for precons, but it's not. It's for a lot of decks you build yourself. It's for a lot of precons that you've changed a bit but haven't put a whole bunch of effort into maximizing, right? But I mean, again, for a beta, it's good enough, and it's important to not let the quest for perfection be the enemy of putting out something into the world that's actually enough to start with, right?
100%. Yeah.
Definitely.
Like if I can just like personally, that's when it comes to building decks, I'm horrible. I can't build a deck on a deck builder. I have to have paper cards in front of me, right? Like maybe not with like CDH, but like, you know, if I'm just putting a deck together with an idea, I'm the kind of person I like to buy the cards. I like to have them in front of me. I like to like, you know, move them around, but then I inevitably end up with like 150 or 200 cards for like, you know, 70 slots of, you know, utility lands and everything else. And so usually what I just end up doing is I just sort them into like need it, want it, can live without it. And 90% of the time, it's like all the need it cards go in, most of the want it cards go in, and then I like look at the curve and whatever, and maybe, you know, tweak some of the other stuff. But like, you know, it's just like, okay, I just want 100 cards, and then I can start playing games with it, and then I can iterate from there. Like, just getting something out there and being used is usually a lot better than trying to make it perfect from the get-go.
Yeah, and you're also trying to introduce a system to like hundreds of thousands of people. So
exactly.
The first version's
like,
never going to be perfect.
As much as us 20 people think about it, plus, you know, maybe another 10 or 20 in Wizards, you know, it's never going to be, you know. Yeah. I mean, like they, you know, like they have the Future League and Wizards and they play test standard and whatever, but like, you know, 50, even like whatever, however many people they have is never going to catch what like thousands, millions of people are going to get, right?
Absolutely.
But I also think that a lot of the community expects that as well. It's you can't expect it to be perfect first time. There's going to be teething problems. There's going to be contentious game design choices, what cards on game changer lists, etc. But from the people I've spoken to and what I've seen, it's been pretty well rolled out. I mean, having, you know, Scryfall and Moxfield on board, two of the biggest deck building tools. People get instantly
and
see,
EDH Rec,
that's
and
exactly. You really canvassed and managed to get all those people on board. So when people looking at decks and going, that's a 2, it's got a game changer in it. And even if they weren't aware of the announcement, maybe they play more casually and they're not up to date with what's going on, because a lot of people aren't. What's this game changer? I'll click on that. Comes up with a list of game changers, explains what it is. So I thought it was really well done in that respect. And as I said, as a first pass, no complaints.
I mean, there were some teething pains with the way that was rolled out on like some of the sites. I personally would have preferred if they'd, you know, wait a couple of days. But a lot of the things that like we ended up having commentary on in that respect weren't things that we necessarily would have thought of. But like I think the state it's in now, where it doesn't even auto assign a bracket, like you can opt your decks out of it, which is nice now. You could also like, I think some of the sites are also not necessarily auto assigning brackets anymore, but like based on it, like you click on the thing, it'll say like estimated, right? Unless you specifically set it to a thing or confirm it, which is nice. But again, the important thing for people to remember with that is the deck builder sites, what they say, that's the floor for your deck, right? That doesn't mean that your deck is a 2. I can get into some examples of my own decks later that don't quite fit, but like, but yeah, I mean, that's I'm happy with that and how it rolled out. And like, I feel like 5 is the right number. Yes, there's people that complain that like, oh, but this, we need a 3.5, we need a 4.5, we need a 2.5, right? Like, it's like, no, decks are still allowed to have a range within the brackets, right? There's going to be strong 2s and weak 2s. There's going to be, you know, or like fast 2s and slow 2s. There's going to be strong 4s and weak 4s, you know, like, I mean, I know several people at my LGS that they're like, I mean, I don't want to use the term like derisively, but they're basically whales, right? Like, they spend a lot of money. They like buying expensive and fancy cards. And when they build their commander decks, they like playing the expensive and powerful cards they own, right? But they also aren't necessarily building decks that are hyper tuned or whatever, right? But
For
their
sure.
decks, by the nature of them playing a bunch of game changers, are going to be in bracket 4, but they're going to end up at the lower end of that bracket usually because there are decks that are more tuned to play amazingly well, even if they maybe don't have as many game changers. And it's like that's fine. It's good for there to be that. And over time, a sort of expected sort of bands are going to make themselves, evident. And if it turns out that there's, a whole lot of people with decks that like straddle 2 and 3 or something like that, then we can maybe address that going forward, right? But like, for now, this is a start, and we need to see how people are out there.
100%. I do. I'm very envious of the people that make exhibition decks where the theme is, oh, all these cards cost $500.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and
They're all
credit.
alpha foils.
So,
Yeah.
yes,
because those exist.
So credit
Yeah.
to my co-host. Look, mentioning game changers was the great segue to talk about the kind of the other half of the big bracket system rollout.
Mhm.
I feel like that in itself is like I feel like there's probably a podcast in there all by itself.
Yeah.
But could you talk us through how the game changers kind of came about? Was there a bigger pool of cards that was perhaps originally there, or was there was game changers late in the game for rolling out? Like I feel like I know lots about the brackets, but not lots about the
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
the game changers.
So game changers as a concept sort of, I mean, we always knew there were going to be cards that were like, naughty cards, like, strong cards, like basically, like red flag cards sort of things, right? Like, the cards that were in bracket 4 of that snapshot or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, or the highly salty cards if you look at EDH Rec or whatever, right? Like that sort of stuff, that needs to be part of the system. But how we were going to do that only really started to develop once we had sort of settled on the brackets and we're starting to get the shape of them, right? As for the cards that are on the list, basically we had a big spreadsheet. I believe it was Tim Willoughby that started it, which was actually interesting because so going back to the CAG days, one of the things we were working on near the end of that was a silver bordered project where basically we were sort of assessing basically all of the silver bordered cards to see, do we think this would be fine as is this something we could recommend as being okay in Commander, like, and we had like categories of like, does this work within the rules? Does it make sense but not quite work within the rules? Yada yada yada, right? And we had a big old spreadsheet of that, which I think was also made by Tim Willoughby. And I believe like the fact that that spreadsheet existed made the Game Changer spreadsheet existing in that system a lot easier because basically we just copied over a lot of that stuff and it was basically, okay, here's a list of cards. And people added cards at the bottom and basically people voted as, do you think this should be on, like, we didn't have the name Game Changers at the time. I forget what we called it before that, basically like just list cards. I think we were just calling them before that. And people basically voted, do you think this is a card that should be here or shouldn't be here? We had probably like 200 to 250 cards listed out at one point. And then we also used that as a way to sort of assess. We used that larger list as a way to assess our own decks and sort of see where are your decks landing in numbers on this sort of thing, right? And how does that line up with how you perceive the deck's strength, right? Or speed or whatever, right? So that was a good sort of way to both check what we were doing with the brackets and to sort of figure out okay, well, this card's showing up in a bunch of decks people don't think are really powerful, so maybe it shouldn't be here, sort of thing. And then we basically iterated on that, but that was definitely a thing that went to Wizards for the final sort of paring down. I believe it also got like taken internal to Wizards, had like their game design people look at it as well because they have more experience with ban lists and that sort of thing.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's how that process worked. If there's a card you think probably should be on the list, we probably voted on it, or gave our opinions. It wasn't like a binding vote.
Yeah.
There have been some cards that hadn't necessarily been considered that came up, but then there's most everything is like, why isn't this there? Why is that there? That came up were definitely things that were on the spreadsheet. People gave a lot of feedback on a lot of cards, and I don't think anyone agrees 100% with the 40 cards that we put out, but I think they're broadly correct, with maybe a couple of ones that shouldn't be there or ones that have obvious things that should be there instead of them, sort of thing. But again, for Go, it's fine.
Yeah,
And and now that people are like assessing the idea, we have a much better sense of what makes a game changer than we did when we were putting this together in the first place. Right?
absolutely. I don't think anyone looked at the 40 cards and went, "Oh, none of that makes sense." I think everyone
Mhm.
knew exactly the type of cards that was going to be on the list, and I
Mhm.
think the point of discussion that I've seen is more to what you're saying is like there's maybe space for different cards that do the same thing, or there's perhaps space for more, but in the first
Mhm.
rollout of this framework, I feel like it makes a lot of sense that it's more of a lighter touch, and then
Mhm.
test what the reaction is and what the community kind of does with it, and then kind of take it from there, rather than saying no, it's 250 cards, it's
So,
a pseudo social ban list of sorts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to roll out all 250 cards, it just becomes daunting
Yeah.
or overwhelming to
It, it
people,
it's
doesn't it?
it's like those pictures you see of like 10 whiteboards at an LGS with their like house rules for Commander, right?
Page 6, is that card on the game changer list? Ah, there
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, again, I feel like yeah. I mean, I have my own personal tastes of what I think should come off or go back on, but like again, probably fine. And we're not quite at that point with the refining of the system yet. So my head's not fully in that space yet. But again, I have my, you know, basic opinions, but I haven't like spent a whole bunch of time debating on every single card yet. So
There's always time for that. There's always time for that.
yeah.
And and you're communicating via Discord. So that means it's the
Yeah.
perfect platform for it.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Amazing. So if I suppose, could you, if there was anything you would like to emphasize around one takeaway for players this new bracket system and game chambers list, game changers. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What would that be?
I basically would like to emphasize that this is not like a new pseudo ban list. It's not like we're not trying to take these cards away from you. Yes, there was, well, if a card's ever going to actually be banned in the format, it'll probably come off the game changers list. And that is true because these are the cards that, are most likely to cause issues in games. But again, it's not a watch list. It's not, these cards are probably going to be banned, or, nothing else could ever be banned, sort of thing. But yeah, they're because these are the cards that change the game, right? Like they come down to either end the game or they inevitably lead to an increase in the speed or power of the game, and in a way that, like, is balanced and not easy for the opponents to necessarily catch up with. You know, I personally would like to see the list a bit more color balanced, but like not that it needs to be perfect, but like, I'd like to see, more than 2 red cards and more than 3 green cards on there. And
It cultivate
but
that.
Yes.
at the same time, I mean, yeah, that if yeah, about actual like changes to the system that I want to see, I want to see the biggest thing that I disagree with is in the sort of like tutoring restrictions at the more casual end of the thing. There's specific like carve out for land tutoring, which I think overly broad. I think we should be fine with things like lands or tutor for a specific land like type, subtype, or super type, right? Something that searches a snow land or your fetch lands or look for a plains, like that sort of stuff is fine. I think generic land tutors, tutor for a land, tutor for 2 lands, right? Should be included. Like crop rotation should probably like,
Almost
because
definitely.
no one's doing anything, right? but like also look, like Primeval Titan is banned, Golos is banned. These are cards that just tutor any land, right? Like reasons these cards are banned and land is super powerful. So I personally would like to see that sort of more refined, and I've made that point, and hopefully I can. But I feel because again, I feel like especially at the lower end where we are saying no mass land denial, that basically makes that a safe space for green ramp,
Yes.
and then that can take over a game if someone gets
Yes.
their Field of the Dead and whatever going, right? Like
even just accelerating and having so much land and then being able to recast their commander an
Yeah,
indefinite amount of time, it just
exactly.
skews the game. I mean,
Yeah.
landfall is just, it's so hard to deal with
Yeah.
unless you're
Yeah.
being horrible and countering land spells
Yeah.
or land destruction.
Yeah. But as for a bigger system, a bigger thing about like the bracket system as a whole, it's like I'd like people to understand that it's not an algorithm, it's not a perfect matchmaking algorithm, it's not a system that's going to find you an ideal game every time. It's a tool to help make your pregame discussions more profitable and hopefully more expedited, right? I know some people were really hoping for, like basically a point system or, that your deck is a 526, right? Like, something that like they can just like compare raw numbers, right? And it's just like, that's not how Commander works, right?
No.
If you're going to do that, you can't account for synergy, you can't account for, whatever, right? You can't account for, okay, this card being in your command zone is much more powerful than it being in your 99 or vice versa, right? But
Absolutely.
but at the same time, like this is a tool, it's meant to help, and it's not at all mandatory if you're happy with your play group.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that's that's a really that was something that we were really passionate about. Passionate about. Oh my goodness, I can't speak tonight.
Yeah.
Is that whole at the end of the day, if you're just playing with your friends, you don't have to follow this if you don't want to, but ultimately it's a system that's trying to help as many people as possible that think they need it. But
yeah,
it is a social format.
And also the brackets are a starting point. Like it could very well be okay. Yeah, my deck contains, an Armageddon, but like XYZ, or this is my what like there are reasons why you can say, okay, this deck does this, but it doesn't like, again, it's a starting point. If people are willing to listen, there can be reasons why, like, okay, this deck technically has this, and this, but that's because whatever, right? Like, again, it's a starting point. It's not a concrete, it's not a prison, right? Like it's just a new starting point for a conversation. And honestly, like so far I've been very happy in that even just at my LGS, I've seen even not necessarily every table is using brackets, but there's a lot more pregame discussion in general, which is great.
Heck yeah.
I think for new players, it's
Yeah.
such a useful tool, isn't it? You can sit down because
Yeah.
we've always considered precons as the bottom level, or we certainly have. It's like, oh, what do you? I've got a low power deck. Well, I've got a precon, and now you've got you've got a bracket below that. You've got a bracket above that. So people that are going to the LGS want to play some Commander, bought a brand new precon, got sleeves, sleeved it up, and they're like, okay, it's bracket 2.
Yeah.
Then what you can play with them. I think it's great.
One thing that we've discussed is once the system's more settled and more refined, with like the playtesting that they can do at Wizards, ideally, like they can actually start printing on some precons. This precon is bracket 2 or whatever, right? Or this precon is bracket, or like say for like some of the Masters sets or the Modern Horizon sets or whatever. It's like this is bracket 3 or whatever, right? Like. I mean, it's another option to help guide players, right? Which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the hardest part of Commander is learning how to tell people about your deck and also understanding other people's. And sometimes it's in the playing that's learned as a brewer and as an opponent as well. Like just sometimes you have to get into the messy situation where, oh, you're running a 4 and I'm running a 3. And that's just going to happen. There's no way to really avoid that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that's also on
and sometimes playing up or down a bracket will be fine, and sometimes it won't.
Yeah, it's the classic adage of a CDH player sits down at the table with a CDH deck, but gets absolutely crapped on by precons because the CDH deck is trying to do one thing in a very specific way, and the other decks are just looking to accrue value.
They get end up with a handful of interaction for stuff that these other decks aren't playing, right?
100%.
Or it's like a lot of the removal in CDH is for low mana value stuff or whatever, right? It's like, well, I can't do anything about your 5-drop, so I guess I die.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I guess it's curious, and sometimes that's a fun experience as well when people want to do that.
Yeah.
So and then now they have a framework to do that if that is their chosen play experience.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I think we've covered the brackets in the game chambers. I did it again. Game.
There's no rooms on the game changer list.
That's it. Oh my god. One day, Luke. One day. No, I actually love the rooms enchantments. Like I actually can't wait to build a deck around it. But as we'll move towards the latter side of the pod as we've been chatting for a little while. What in a world where there's a 6th bracket, what do you see that is?
I could see. I mean, again, I feel like if there was going to be a 6th bracket, it would probably be a refinement somewhere in the middle. But if we're talking about something like wild on the end, then probably like no ban list Commander.
Ooh.
Like super CEDH, right? Like just go fucking nuts, right? Like
it's either going to be
Time Vault,
It's either going to be super CEDH or an exhibition deck, isn't it? When you take the ban list away, people just build crazy stuff.
Or it's like everyone, like you've got your Grizzle brands in the command zone, and someone's rocking up a silver border.
Yeah. And this is my deck with 7 conspiracies.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so funny. I actually know that would be miserable. I never want to play that game.
Yeah.
It would just be Paradox Engine again.
Yeah, no.
I know. I'm so glad that card's banned.
Again, I feel like I mean, I've heard people asking for like no ban list, and it's like we can't do that because then that's not Commander, right? Then
Yeah.
that's something else, right? Like you're welcome to do that with your friends if you want to
Yeah.
try it, right? Like, or you're welcome again. I could also see if we do, you know, um, if we hopefully the silver border project that we were working on before is eventually going to see some fruit, but like right now it's a low priority compared to everything else we're working on. But like I could definitely see a silver bordered bracket with maybe some special construction rules as well, right? So one that was made to sort of emphasize fun and weird, but also not necessarily just be exhibition, right? Because there are some silver bordered cards that are quite powerful
For sure.
and that wouldn't belong in bracket, in exhibition or core, right? But I could definitely see like here is a, or I mean maybe have like S as a qualifier on a bracket, right? This is my silver core deck or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, but
I
yeah.
mean,
Anyway,
it
but
would be
yeah, I
interesting to
mean
see that
that's
game changer list.
yeah. Oh yeah, there's definitely if the silver bordered cards were recommended, there's definitely some cards that are like, look, this card is just insanely broken and we cannot allow it to be played. Just in general, like Mana Screw for one, right? Which is basically just infinite mana, right? Or it just takes the whole game. Goddamn game. You thought Paradox Engine was bad.
Oh, yeah.
Watch someone flip a coin endlessly to try and get infinite mana.
Oh, I've seen that in CEDH.
Yeah. Yeah, but like Karkashima at least is finite in a way. But
yeah.
well, unless they get the what's the stupid Jin the freak that lets you flip any number.
Oh, God.
You can just
Yeah,
activate
I know
infinite
what you
times to
mean.
flip coins.
Yeah.
The name escapes me just now.
But anyway.
He is it
Anyway,
one.
yeah.
I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Anyway, but yeah.
So I think if we're moving to final thoughts, and what advice would you give players trying to find the right bracket for their deck?
I would recommend that basically if you have a deck built, don't necessarily worry about what game changers you're running. Don't worry about, tutors, combos, land denial, all of that stuff. Think about the kind of game you like to play and like compare it to the actual like write-ups of the brackets. And then basically I feel like it's more important to match the deck, like the feel of the deck to the bracket, and then you can alter the contents, right? Rather than being like, well, this deck is this, and this, so it's at least upgraded. But I don't play any game changers, so I might as well add XYZ to it, and now it's even more strong and maybe not what you want it to be, right? I personally feel like, at least with decks that I don't design with a like very specific plan, I tend to not build decks. Like I know some people who like Jim from formerly of the RC, he has his like Ether Lich deck, or he has decks that are very specifically built around doing certain things, right? I'm not that sort of deck builder. I'm sort of like I usually build around a commander, right? Or around a theme that's like tangential to the commander. And I'm usually of the opinion of basically once I have the deck built, letting it tell me what it wants to be, right? How it wants to play, right? I've had some decks that have surprised me and be like, oh, you're like, sorry, you're very cutthroat, right? Like, or you're like, oh, you're just like slow and fun, and I thought you might be more aggressive, but you're not. But that's cool. I can lean into that a bit more. But it basically find the place that is the right feel for your deck, and like help and fit your deck to that, right? Like there's nothing wrong, um like for me personally, like I'll just say my own experience, right? Like I'm not saying you should be like, oh, if this deck is, is upgraded, it's very much plays at that sort of speed, but it doesn't have, but I only have one game changer in it, so I'm just gonna find two good cards to jam in here to make it, to like maximize my potential. But it's like, no. But at the same time, I personally was a player who was reluctant to play a lot of the game changer cards in what I considered, not high power decks. But then it's like, okay, well, you know, like my Alesha deck is very definitely a 3. It's very definitely upgraded, but I was only running like one game changer. But it's like, okay, well, this is a deck that wants a few very specific cards, to get, weird combo wins at the end. So yeah, sure. Why don't I just put a demonic tutor in here, right? Like, I think that would be fine, right? And I'm not saying you need, again, don't think about it as like min max. You don't want to min max. You don't want to like, any system can be broken if you try, right? We can't stop people, bad faith actors, from abusing the letter of the law rather than following its spirit. But, again, at the same time, if you've maybe been cautious, but your deck, a deck is a little stronger, maybe let it breathe, give it that fertilizer to help it like reach its potential and do the cool thing more often, yeah, I mean, I don't know, that was sort of meandering, but I hope that sort of made sense to people, right?
No, I like that. It's particular that especially that last point you made about doing the special thing more often. It's like, how often have I feel like I think of the times of how often I've built a deck and I'm like, that magical Christmas moment.
Yeah.
This would be amazing for it to happen. And then it never happens because you've tried to do it in like a quote unquote fair way without necessarily playing some of the what we now call game changer cards. And I do think that like, well, wouldn't it be fun if that happened more often? Like, I think people would enjoy that situation and that way of trying to win. So yeah, it's certainly food for thought, right? You've been, well, you're in my immediate play group, so maybe not.
No, you made a good point there, because we share that ethos as well. A lot of the game changer cards, excluding maybe the 7 mana, the big spells, Bolus, Citadel, etc. But things like Force of Will, Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, even Mana Crypt, which no doubt would have been on the game changer list where it was banned. They're cards that we would only put really at the top end of our decks, wouldn't we? And
absolutely.
Now you're talking, it's okay to use those cards in certain scenarios. It's almost
in moderation,
the stigma with them, exactly, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Like to expand, like for example, my Alesha deck is like treasure based, and before we like publish, I'd be like, well, that was like the only game changer in the deck. It's like, maybe I should just take it out, and then it's like, no, this really isn't core. It's like, so that can go back in. I'll cut something else, and then then it's like, okay, maybe I'll do the demonic tutor, and I'm sure there's other cards in there that might end up on the list or whatever. Like, it's, let your deck breathe, right? It's okay. Like, I think one thing that's nice is that the game changer list is permission to do the cool thing.
Definitely.
Sometimes, do the cool thing at the right tables, right?
100%.
Like,
yeah.
Everyone wants to do the cool thing, see other people's decks do the cool thing. But, the goal of this is to put people in the right games where my cool thing isn't like pissing you off, or, isn't like, drastically out of line with what else is going on in the game, right? Like
100%.
Like, for example, like you both played against my Helga deck, right? My
still traumatized.
Which is the really
outrageous.
That deck is very much like a bracket 3 upgraded deck, but it has no game changers in it. It's just a disgusting synergy pot, right?
Yeah.
But like, I would never play that, at a 2. Like, I think it's not necessarily on the high end of 3, but it's definitely not at the bottom end of it either, right? And so it's just, you need to figure out where the deck lives, and like, that's also a deck that doesn't necessarily want anything on the game changer list because of how it plays, right? Like,
It was
you
very
know, I
good
mean,
when it got
maybe there's a
going.
couple things, but like, yeah, exactly. Like, you know, because anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's basically like, again, you know, don't don't feel like you have to play game changers, but at the same time, give yourself permission to, if your deck, again, like, because again, like going back to like what I was saying about like those bracket 4 decks that are just, I play a bunch of good cards, but the deck isn't necessarily super tuned. Maybe those people would have more fun if they like pared down to 3 game changers and played their decks in upgraded, right? Like, or they'd have more fun if they just tuned the rest of the deck up, right? Because they're already playing a powerful strategy or whatever, right?
Yeah, true.
Like the one example I can think of, there was someone who was someone at my LGS who was playing the new creature Karn. Can't remember what it's called.
Living Legacy.
Something like that, yeah. But the one that's a creature, like 4 mana one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a very strong, like fast, a very strong like artifact ramp, mono brown deck that was like, yeah, this deck is cool, but hey, I started playing in 95.
No, I like that. It's a great way to describe an artifact deck. I'm playing mono brown.
Yeah, brown border, baby.
Yeah. Well, I mean, colorless artifact decks back in the day were called mud, right? Like
I like it.
But anyway, yeah. So like again, like again, don't be shackled by the bracket system, but also don't see it only as a restriction. See it as a permission, right? Like again, we don't want to make people like necessarily change how they play, but like ideally it would be nice to see sort of a sort of relatively accepted sort of within each bracket, like to have, this is what this sort of deck feels like, right? Like, we don't want there to be like core decks that are here and core decks that are here, and there's like 2 big spikes and very little in the middle sort of thing, right? That probably means it should be another bracket, but at the same time, we also want to let that diversity exist, right?
No, for sure. I think it's the intent behind it all, right? And that's that's the wonderful thing about Commander as well, and where the intention is in all the different brackets and play experiences that folk want. So I feel like so long as people are coming to the table in good faith and being open, I think everybody's going to have a great time no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for finding some time to hang out with Luke and I tonight. And is there any final words you would like to share with the gigantic audience that we have?
I mean, basically just, the system's only going to work if people give it a chance, right? Like, I feel like it's been embraced well, and, people accept that it's not perfect, which is fine, right? But at the same time, people like, again, when it first came out, there were a lot of people being like, oh, XYZ, oh, my deck's a 1, yeah, if you don't want to engage with the system in good faith, then you don't have to engage with it, right? Like, we would prefer that people come to it with an open mind and see how it actually can help find a good game. And I feel like largely that's how it's been received, but I'm sure there's also some people that are either waiting for it to not be beta or are just skeptical or whatever. But in that case, I mean, once the non-beta version rolls out, please approach it with an open mind, or keep playing with your play group and have fun. Like, we don't want to take anyone's games away from them, right? We don't want to force anyone to play a certain way, but We're just trying to find like a path or 5 paths that people can follow to, find good pickup games, right? Like
100%. And I guess ultimately, the panel is asking for feedback as well. So it's not just a case of
absolutely, yeah.
listening
No,
to the
absolutely.
panel. It's also about feeding back and sharing
Yeah.
experiences. Could
Absolutely.
you remind us the best way for folk to get in touch with the format panel?
The best way to get in touch is just to either tag Gavin or tag any of the format panel members or send them messages or whatever. We're all like open to listening to people. Personally, you can find me on Blue Sky at jackalite.bsky.social, which is JAQALYTE. You can also find me on Discord under that name, on many fine Discords, including the Shattergang Discord. But yeah, we don't have a general feedback form because that would probably get swamped quite easily. And we'd rather that people need to take like a bit of effort to get their feedback to us, because that usually means it's going to be more thought out, right? But yeah, but like you can find, if you go back to Gavin's article announcing the panelists, I believe there's links to all of our socials in there. You can just, I'm sure also if you just have feedback and have nowhere else to send it, you could probably just send it to some general wizard's email and ask for it to be forwarded to Gavin, right? Like,
true. Yeah.
But yeah, and again, I'm sure there might be more official channels once we're out of beta, but for the most part, like, again, just get in touch with individual people. I mean, if you feel like your playgroup or your store or whatever has a bunch of feedback, if you want to collect that in a document and send it to us, that's great. Just please don't send us, 1,000 different pieces of feedback at once. But like, I mean, we're happy to hear from, store owners, individual players, content creators, whatever, right? We want to hear from everyone in the community. Like, we want this to work just as much for the person who, maybe goes to a convention once a year, as much as the person who's maybe venturing out from their kitchen table for the first time to their LGS or whatever, right? Like, or also from the person who has, a full set of third-color identity. Like we want to hear from you as well, right? Like,
yeah,
like
no, for sure.
We want Commander to be an open Big Ten. That's another reason that we have exhibition and we have CEDH in the system, right? We want it to be like, look, there's a place for everyone here. So, we can't do that unless we hear from everyone, right? Or at least representatives of everyone, right? So, on the whole, please just tell us what you're thinking, right? Even if you think we're on the right track and you don't have any specific feedback, that's still good feedback. It's like, a lot of times people will only give feedback if they have something to complain about or they feel like something's being done wrong,
100%.
right? It's, even if it's like, I think this is okay, but, I feel like it could be fixed. That's what we feel for the most part, right? Like, I don't need, 3 pages of, of like perfectly like philosophical breakdowns of the system, right? If you're saying like, hey, I tried this at my LGS, we played games at brackets, 2 and 4. This was good. This wasn't so good, cool. Like, I liked it. My friend didn't. That's still really good feedback, right? Like, it's all welcome. We're happy to listen. I've had lots of people get in touch with me that I don't agree with their takes on things, but I still value having heard from them.
Yeah, for sure. That's you don't get to the right place without listening to everyone. So
exactly.
Fingers crossed the next iteration or the final version, whichever we see next, is something that everyone can be happy with.
Yeah.
It's my feedback, Charlotte.
Here's
Thumbs up. Yeah.
2 thumbs.
2 thumbs up.
Nice.
Yeah, no, like for what it's worth, and as if anyone's listened to the previous podcast, we're really encouraged by the beta. I can see the intention in it, so really excited to see where it goes.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, Charlotte,
it's been great to be here. You are great folks, and happy to chat with you anytime, and hopefully get some more games soon.
Heck yeah, I'm sure we will manage all of those things.
Yeah.
All right, Charlotte. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.